Our 1,300-kilometre journey began in Vietnam before proceeding into the neighbouring country of Laos. Starting in Hanoi, we cycled into the mountainous north of Vietnam before crossing the border into Laos and heading south to the capital city of Vientiane. On arriving at Hanoi airport, we loaded our bikes into a waiting truck whilst we boarded a coach that took us to a hotel in the centre of the city. Hanoi has a population of around 2.5 million, and it seemed that nearly everyone gets around the city on a motorbike or scooter. Away from the traffic, Hanoi has several scenic lakes and public parks. The city also houses the mausoleum to Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam's leader from 1945 to 1969. In the evening, we were taken on a rickshaw ride to our restaurant for the evening meal. It was a bit scary at times as we weaved our way in and out of the traffic. The following morning, we left our hotel and boarded a coach to avoid having to cycle the busy roads of Hanoi. The coach took us about 100 kilometres northwest of Hanoi to the small town of Song Thao. Whilst we were having lunch, our bikes were offloaded from a following truck, and then soon we were ready to cycle our first miles into Vietnam. Our ride that day would take us 55 kilometres northwest to the town of Yen Bai. We soon discovered that life in the countryside was a complete contrast to that in Hanoi. After dinner, we walked into the town of Yen Bai to admire the illuminations. The following morning, we woke to cloudy skies and drizzle. Despite the rain, we set off on the next leg of our journey. We were heading west for 85 kilometres to the town of Nha Lo. On each day, our coach and support crew would drive on ahead and arrange for an 11's stop, either at the Vietnamese equivalent of a cafe, or in this instance, under the roof of a partly completed house. Back on the bikes, we continued cycling in the rain through an increasingly undulating landscape. On many occasions, we passed sheets of thin wood along the roadside that would normally be drying in the sunshine. We never did find out exactly what it was used for. we stopped at a roadside restaurant for lunch. Our driver also doubled as an amazing chef and cooked us delicious food on his single burner stove. We've come through some wonderful scenery today. Unfortunately, because of this drizzle, I'm not been able to take much video of it, but we've seen paddy fields and tea plantations on the mountainsides. Fingers crossed for better weather tomorrow. Towards the end of the day, the rain stopped. Our clothes had dried out by the time we reached our hotel.
Hello!
Hello. Our leader John demonstrated the consequences of not having mudguards fitted to his bike. You filthy leader. We awoke to another morning of low cloud and drizzle. As it was a fairly short day on the bikes, we spent the morning looking around the local market. A wide variety of produce was on show, from fruit and vegetables to meat and fish. Vegetarians should look away now. After a relaxing morning, we were back on the bikes and into the rain. It was only 50 kilometres to our next hotel in the town of Tu Le. The first 20 kilometres was generally uphill, which gave us great views of the mountains and remote farmland. After a short stop for lunch, we were back on the road, where we were passed by numerous buses and motorbikes. In most villages, we were greeted by excited children. Along the roadside, we also witnessed a cattle being tended, usually by the women of the village. The rain of the last few days had also taken its toll on the road. So what do you think of today then, Pat?
Oh, lovely. Loved every minute of it, Michael. Particularly the muddy bits.
Yes, thought they were exceptionally nice, didn't you?
Well, yeah. Hot water at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Can't guarantee it.
After arriving at our hotel, we were offered a welcoming cup of tea, and we all hoped for better weather tomorrow. Our departure from the hotel the following morning was delayed by cows on the road. However, by 8:30 we'd set off on yet another cloudy and damp day. Today's ride would take us 89 kilometres from Tu Lay to the town of Van Yuan. The first 20 kilometres was all uphill, taking us to a mountain pass at 1,600 metres above sea level.
Well, here we are on yet another foggy Vietnam morning. We're on a long climb out of Tu Lay, a 20-kilometre climb up to the summit where we're going to have a stop for refreshments. It's not particularly steep, but it goes on and on and on. And because you can't see the scenery, you take your mind off the climb. Never mind, we keep getting promised that the sun will be out later this week. Fingers crossed. Pat, I don't remember this fog being in the itinerary.
Oh, it's in the small print.
Oh, okay, I'll check it when I get back to the hotel. You're probably right.
Yes.
At the top of the pass, there was a very welcoming cup of tea and biscuits.
So this is Tom, our local expert who's camera shy.
Sorry, Tom. Hello. Welcome to Vietnam.
Sunny Vietnam.
Sunny. The weather like England. It's foggy, isn't it?
Better in England.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thankfully, the fog cleared as we descended from the top of the pass. We stopped to look at an intriguing water-powered mill by the roadside. We also had great views of the terraced paddy fields. Lunch was provided in a lay-by on the way down. Our multi-talented driver once again provided an amazing selection of food from his stove, including platefuls of hot, crispy chips. There was plenty of downhill after lunch, allowing us to relax and enjoy the passing scenery. We had our evening meal in the hotel that night. This was very much a do-it-yourself affair, as we placed various meat, fish and vegetables into bubbling casserole dishes, heated on hot plates on the tables. It was all very delicious. The road ahead on the following day would take us up into the mountains of North Vietnam. We were cycling the 104 kilometres to the hill town of Sa Pa. To get there, we had to cycle over the Tram Ton Pass, the highest pass in Vietnam at 1,900 metres above sea level. After some fine-tuning of the bikes, we were ready to set off on one of the hardest days of the tour. Unfortunately for us, it was also one of the wettest days of the tour.
We've now started a climb of the Tram Ton Pass at 1900 metres. It's the highest road pass in Vietnam. Unfortunately, it's somewhat cloudy and raining at the moment. The road is also pretty rough in places. But coming up now soon to our lunch stop, which will be nice, before we then tackle the remaining 16k climb to the top.
Lunch was a very welcome escape from the climbing and the rain. Our driver once again worked his magic, serving us yet more freshly cooked chips. After lunch, the climbing continued for a further 16 kilometres.
Well, we're about halfway up the pass now and can't see a thing. We're in a thick fog. Well, we think we're at the top now. The mist is so thick that we can't actually see the sign, so hopefully when we come back up here in a couple of days' time, we'll be able to convince ourselves it really is the top. And there's a very welcoming little tea shack at the top here, and we're all sampling Coca-Colas and
Red Bull.
Red Bull even. What more could a cyclist ask for? Well, I've seen this sign back here now, and I think it's pretty obvious we're at the top, and it's all downhill from here, hopefully.
After a long and fast descent, we arrived in the town of Sapa, where we spent the night. The restaurant opposite our hotel had burnt down just hours before we arrived. Sapa has a reputation for being cloaked in mist and fog, and it lived up to its reputation, spoiling any views that we might have had. The following morning, we retraced our steps back over the Tram Ton Pass and back to the hotel we had left the previous day. This was a change to the planned itinerary, as the road to our intended hotel had been turned into a mud bath by the heavy rain over the last few days. After climbing for 12 kilometres, we regained the summit of the Tram Ton Pass.
Welcome to the top, Tram Ton Pass. You're on the highest pass in Vietnam. Yep, thank you. It's high 2,000 meters.
Look at the view. Pan for the view.
Beautiful view.
So yes, as Mr. Tom said, we're now at the top in fog again. I think we're all getting a little bit fed up with this weather now. So hopefully this time when we get back down to the bottom, the sun will be out.
We had a cold and wet descent in thick fog for 10 kilometres. After breaking through the fog, we then had to negotiate a very wet and muddy road. At the bottom of the pass, the rain stopped, the road became smooth, and we began to enjoy ourselves again. The dry weather meant that we could have our first picnic lunch. Above us there was a large tea plantation where women were busy picking the tea leaves.
Well, at long last the sun is coming out. It's only taken 7 days, but it's well worth the wait.
Down in the valley, we saw the local Vietnamese going about their daily business. After arriving at a hotel, we gave the bikes a good clean in the hope that we'd seen the last of the rain and the muddy roads.
Well, today we're heading into the unknown. With the change of route, none of us have actually cycled this road before, so we've got our fingers crossed that it's not too difficult and there's tarmac on the road most of the way. Let's see how we get on.
At 120 kilometres, today's ride will be the longest of the tour, from Thanh Nguyen to Tuan Gao.
Time for another cup of tea!
Yay!
As well as being the longest day, today also turned out to be one of the hilliest, with 3 enormous climbs spread throughout the day.
Okay, we now reached the summit of the final climb of the day, which was supposed to be a flat stage, ended up going to over 1,020 metres or more. Anyway, it's all downhill now. I doubt they will get back to the hotel before it gets dark. Hello.
Hello.
Well, we're just fitting lights to the bikes now because the last 7 or 8k are going to be in the dark, I think.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
All right.
Ciao!
Ciao.
Morning.
Morning. What's today's route like then?
Today I fly.
Today you fly?
Yeah. Fly on the road.
Today's ride would take us 74 kilometres to the town of Dien Bien Phu. A relatively easy day with just one climb followed by a long fast descent at the end. We started the day by cycling along a valley that was full of paddy fields. we saw many examples of the hard work involved in maintaining them and ploughing them ready for planting. The paddy fields in the valley were very well irrigated. Water was drawn up from the river by a series of water wheels, and bamboo pipes then fed the water to each field. The familiar blue plastic tables were laid out on the side of the road for our 11s stop, halfway up the only climb of the day. After a welcome break, the climbing continued. The blue plastic tables and chairs were laid out at the top of the climb for our lunch stop, which this time included a saucepan full of baked beans. After lunch, it was pretty much all downhill to Dien Bien Phu. On arriving in Dien Bien Phu, some of us took a taxi into town to visit the War Museum. In 1954, Dien Bien Phu was the site of the Vietnam Army's battle with the French. The 55-day campaign succeeded in ending over 70 years of French rule. The museum contained a collection of military equipment captured from the French. Across the road from the museum were the remains of one of the French fortifications used in the war. This was our last night in Vietnam, and back at the hotel they'd erected a banner to celebrate our achievement so far. Before our evening meal, our leader John thanked our support crew for all of their hard work.
Just remains for me, just on behalf of the group, to give them all a little token of our thanks. So, Mr. Stewart. Tom Cruise. Mr. Tang, the truck.
After dinner, we were treated to some music and entertainment, including the traditional dance, Walking with Wine Bottle on Head. It was then time for us to take to the dance floor with another traditional Vietnamese dance, having ankles broken by bamboo poles. The following morning we got on board a bus. This drove us up to the border crossing at Tay Trang. From there we would enter Laos and cycle for 72 kilometres to our overnight stop in Muang Quao. We were all very glad to be on the bus, as it was a very rough and steep climb up to the border crossing. After passing through the Vietnamese border control, we offloaded our bikes from the truck that had followed us up the road. We then left Vietnam and cycled 2 kilometres through no man's land to reach the Laos border. We had to wait absolutely ages for our paperwork to be processed, but eventually we were allowed through. The first 20 kilometres of our cycling in Laos was downhill, but on a very rough, stony and dusty road. We had a new support crew, but they too also stopped by the roadside to offer us refreshments. At the bottom of the descent, we passed through our first village, with a major river running across the road. It was here that we had our lunch, cooked in very primitive conditions. After lunch we had to cross the river. Fortunately there was a footbridge. After crossing the river, the road began a long climb, with the soft sandy surface making the going that much harder. At the top we had a short refreshment stop. Once over the top we had fantastic views of the tree-covered hillsides stretching out into the distance. It was then a long fast descent to the Nam U River, with our destination, Muang Quao, on the other side. A short ferry ride took us across the river. It was then a very steep walk uphill to our hotel for the night. The following morning we rode our bikes down the hill to a bar where we had our breakfast. This consisted of freshly cooked pancakes topped with bananas, pineapple and served with optional maple syrup. Today we will be boarding boats that will take us on a 60-kilometre journey down the Nam U River. Then it will be a 30-kilometre bike ride to our overnight accommodation in Pak Mong. We first had to load our 20 bikes on board the boats. Once we and the bikes were on board, we were ready for the off. After the excitement of yesterday's boat trip, the following day's ride was fairly mundane. A gently undulating road took us 114 kilometres southwest to the town of Luang Prabang.
Coffee with milk or coffee with sugar?
He's a porn star, isn't he?
Luang Prabang lies on the Mekong River. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and contains numerous Buddhist temples, which we wandered around during our free day in the town. At the end of the day, we walked to a temple on the top of a hill in the centre of town to watch the sunset. After dinner, we wandered around the night market before retiring to bed. The next leg of our journey took us 80 kilometres south to the village of Kayo Kacham. The route involved 2 climbs on a very hot and humid day. We're on the second climb of the day now. It's getting pretty hot, but lunch should be about 6k up the road. It was so hot that our support crew very wisely arranged our picnic lunch under the shade of some banana trees. The second climb continued all the way to our overnight stop. Our rooms were located at the rear of a row of shops. My room all to myself tonight, and this is Mike's room next door. And the toilets are opposite in the courtyard.
Open toilet.
No, it's like, oh, open toilet. Toilet will now be demonstrated. Toilets. My little assistant here will demonstrate. Oh, European toilets. This is Mike's toilet, and this is my toilet. Hello. But the showers are about 200 yards down that way. We continued our journey southwards the following day to the town of Kazi, a distance of 98 kilometres. So how's our tandem crew getting on this morning then?
They're very good today. We like the breeze, the light breeze that's blowing. We like a little bit of sun to warm our legs. And we like the thought of the next stop.
Unfortunately, the next stop was at the top of a very long climb. Lunch was taken in a town at the top of the climb, which also had a large bustling market. After lunch, we had a nice long descent. We then began to see some wonderful karst rock formations for which this area of Laos is well known. You're not riding this morning, Ken?
No.
No?
No.
That must mean there's a hill.
Yes.
The following day, we had a short ride of just 60 kilometres to the town of Vientiane. We rode together in a single group for the first few miles, as we had an appointment at a local school. Our local tour guide explained to the children who we were and why we were cycling through their country. We'd had a collection to raise money to buy much needed pens, pencils and exercise books for the school.
Thank you for all your contribution that you have been traveling from overseas and you have attention of visiting our school, our content school. We are very honored with your support and we will do our best to teach the students and give this book to the students. And we wish you have a safe journey and enjoy your day in Laos. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
After leaving the school, we began a long climb, the reason why our local guide Ken decided not to ride his bike. At the top of the climb, our support crew had laid out a very welcoming picnic lunch. We managed to get our support crew to pose for the camera. They consisted of two young couples together with Ken. After lunch, it was an easy ride to our destination of Vientiane. We congregated on the edge of town before the ride to the hotel. Access to the hotel was down a steep, stony track. Our hotel was on the banks of the Nam Dong River, where we watched the sun setting behind the mountains. Our journey through Laos was almost over as we cycled south for 109 kilometres to the village of Na Nam. We came across an interesting activity where rows of young girls dressed in traditional costume were throwing tennis balls to young men standing opposite. It turned out this was a way of introducing the boys and girls to each other in the village. A boy would throw a ball to a girl he was interested in, and if the girl was also interested, she would return the ball to him. Our hotel in Na Nam was at the end of a long stony track. The hotel was built on a hillside and consisted of wooden chalets, each with its own veranda overlooking a lake. The following morning we had breakfast outside before packing our panniers for the last time and setting off on the final leg of our journey. This would take us 96 kilometres south to Vientiane, the capital city of Laos. We followed a major river for most of the morning, and this was where we had our final 11th stop of the tour. All too soon we were back on the road and were overtaken by our support vehicle, complete with blue plastic chairs on its roof. Before reaching the city of Vientiane, we caught a final glimpse of rural life as we saw fishermen using traditional Lao fishing nets.
Somebody, have a cup of tea.
We soon arrived on the outskirts of Vientiane and then made our way to the Victory Gate to celebrate the completion of our tour. That evening we went out to a restaurant for our end of tour meal, and our tour organiser John took the opportunity to thank our local support crews.
The team that we had up in Vietnam were excellent. I couldn't criticise them in any way. The team that we had here in Laos were excellent, but there's something special, something sort of different about the way they do the job. It's not what they do, it's not how they do it. I think it's more about who they actually are. And on behalf of the group, I'd like to say it's been a great experience for all of us. I've been here 5 times now, and I just look forward to coming back and meeting with these guys once again. This tour won't run for many more years with us leading it, and I've said that when Ken stops, I stop. That's how we feel about it. So thanks all.
The following morning we began packing our bikes for the return flight home. We had cycled 1,300 kilometres over 19 days and would take home memories of the wonderful scenery and the friendliness and happiness of the people we had met during our journey.